Hello. So today we're going to be talking about shaking and shaping. This is just a personal revelation that the Lord gave me. When I was writing it down, I knew that I was going to share it with you at some point, and I might talk a little bit after just to clarify some things and maybe drive a few points home. But for the most part, I think we'll just be reading. So let's just go ahead. Let me see if this will. Okay. All right. Throughout my life, I have experienced shaking, bad experiences, relationships, and circumstances that were either accompanied by temptation or brought up within me anxiety, worry, or fear. And in the past, depending on the circumstance, I would be quick to identify the weapon that was being used against me, and that's fine and good. But I would make the mistake of not asking myself, why did that shake me? Here's what I know now. I'm not a punching bag. I'm not subject to being tossed to and fro by whatever prophetic word is given or whatever someone teaches. I do not have to submit myself under the witchcraft of slander and curses against me. My emotions do not get to be used against me. I do have power and authority over the enemy, and I do not give the enemy power and authority over me. We are in the last days, and in the last days things will get better in a spiritual sense, but worse in a worldly sense. Wars, rumors of them, earthquakes, pestilence, a great falling away, persecution, false prophets and teachers, the Antichrist. We are going to have plenty of opportunity to be shaken. God is going to shake anything that can be. And we sing that and preach that a lot. But when finally God gives us a dose of shaking, instead of asking ourselves why, we just point a finger or identify our enemy, and maybe accuse by saying or thinking of someone else, it's your fault I feel this way. When in reality, no one is in control of our emotions or feelings or responses but us. And if you're feeling shaken, that means something within you could be shaken. That means something within you is not founded on Jesus. When something shakes us, it means that the Lord is trying to shape us. The Lord means it when He says, no weapon formed against you will prosper. He means it when He says that He has plans to prosper you and not to harm you. And He intends for what the enemy means for evil to use it for our good. But this perspective is a step toward maturing into a responsible Christian. You are not a slave to earthly circumstances. You are not a slave to witchcraft. You are not a slave to the enemy's plans and attacks. You are a Christian. You are higher than that. You are a slave to Christ. And anything or anyone who encourages you to be a slave to earthly circumstances or anything other than Christ is operating in an antichrist spirit. It is the antichrist spirit that uses earthly circumstances partnered with fear to bring about the mark of the beast. Even if people around you want you to be swayed by opinions and encourage a fear of man mindset that wants you to be worried about what others think or say about you, this is a mindset of slavery and is an antichrist spirit with an antichrist agenda to condition you into being a coward that is a slave. So finally, I encourage you to remember that Jesus Christ has given you power and authority over the enemy. I want to remind you that you are not a slave to your pain, trauma, and witchcraft and other people's bad intentions. Any authority the enemy has to prosper against you has been given to him by you through some type of agreement, and you can take it back. You are not a punching bag, and if you are shaken, take an internal look and ask why. So I want to touch on a few things. Number one, this is directed toward those of us who've experienced pain, unfavorable circumstances, maybe terrible, unjust things happening to us. And instead of choosing to take steps toward healing and forgiveness and moving on, we choose to stay in our pain even when God makes a way out for us. I've done this myself, where unfavorable things have happened to me. And instead of having a God perspective when those bad things happen, instead of looking to God when I feel that pain, when I feel a sting of betrayal, when something I feel like not good is happening, instead of looking to God and saying, I trust you, even though this stinks, and it doesn't feel good right now, I trust that somehow you're using this for my good. I trust what your word says about who you are, and that you're not intending to harm me, but to prosper me. Lord, I believe your word. I believe who you are. Instead of having that perspective that would help shape me into being more like Christ, I took on the perspective of the enemy, and all I seen was the pain and the hurt and the people or the enemy that did hurt me, and I couldn't get out of my pain because it was like I couldn't see God in the pain and what I was experiencing. And until my mindset shifted from pointing the finger and saying, you're the reason I feel this way, until my mindset shifted and I chose to trust God and put all of my hope, all of my faith, all of my trust in Him, I allowed that pain to shape how I seen God, myself, and other people. And I can't help but think of Israel when they were wandering in the wilderness. You know, God had delivered them from Egypt and had taken them on this journey to inherit their promised land. And through that, they experienced pain and unfavorable circumstances, but also in those times, they seen the wonders of God, many signs and miracles that God performed before them. And instead of choosing to trust God, that He would fulfill His promise to them, that they would inherit the land of Canaan, and that they could trust Him, they chose to partner with the enemy and took on a demonic perspective that accused God and other people. And I want us all to come to a place where no matter what the enemy throws at us, we won't be swayed. We won't allow the enemy or fear or whatever to influence us, but instead we'll rise above it as Christians and choose to focus and set our gaze on Jesus and choose to trust Him. Whenever we experience pain, unfavorable circumstances, whatever it may be that we just see as not good, whenever we feel that sting of betrayal, what we do with that information determines if we're in agreement with the enemy or if we're in agreement with the Lord. Someone who's in agreement with the enemy will choose to just point a finger and accuse back and stay offended and stay bitter. And ultimately, their bad perspective of what's going on around them will shape how they see people, it will shape their future relationships, and it will shape how they see God. And it will shape how they see themselves. But a person who takes that information, a person who, sees that person's hurting me, yes, okay, the enemy's trying to make me afraid here and trying to intimidate me there. Maybe you feel a witchcraft attack come against you. The person who comes in agreement with God will have the perspective of, I feel all that, but that doesn't get to determine who I am. That doesn't get to influence how I feel. That doesn't get to influence how I think. I choose to think higher, above this world, and set my focus on Jesus, and I choose to trust Him. And even though this hurts, and even though this stinks, and I would rather not be going through this right now, and this is unjust, and I don't deserve this, I'm choosing to take steps toward healing, to trust that this is somehow for my good, to love that person anyway, and to forgive them. That's the person who comes in agreement with the Lord. The person who comes in with agreement with the Lord looks at everything that seems to be against them and says, Lord, I choose to trust you even though I don't understand what's happening. I choose to believe your word and that somehow this is for my good and that this is for the benefit of your kingdom. I know that you love me and that you're intimately involved in my life and that you're not going to waste this. And I choose to trust you with this. That's coming in agreement with the Lord. We're in the last days, and we are going to have many opportunities to be shaken, to be afraid, especially with the earthly circumstances. Maybe someone that you don't like gets elected into office. Maybe food supply runs out. Maybe pestilence comes back. Whatever it is, the Bible prophesies it. It's inevitable. It will happen. We will have plenty of opportunity to be shaken by that. But when things come up throughout our life, if we feel that shaking within, say something happens that's not good, and it produces this fear, we feel fear all of a sudden, worry, anxiety about, well, what am I going to do? That dumb thumbs up, it always comes up there. I don't know why. Anyway, but we have that moment where we're wondering, okay, what's going to happen? I'm feeling anxiety, I'm worried, all of this stuff. I want us, and I think this is just my advice for me to you. You don't have to do this. This is just advice. This is just what I do and what I found that helps me. If I'm feeling something like that, I take that as a red flag, or more like a green light, to ask the Lord, why did that make me afraid? What's going on? Why does that person's opinion about me make me cry? Why does that person's prophetic word get me a lot of sorts? Why am I so scared of witchcraft being done against me? Why did that provoke fear? Why am I staying up at night worrying about money? Why am I losing sleep over this? And ask him why. And he is faithful to help you. And he'll tell you why. And then to those of us who always feel as if the enemy's attacking us and always has the upper hand, maybe we're constantly influenced in our emotions and in our minds, worrying, afraid. Ask the Lord where you gave the enemy authority to influence you that way. Because the truth is as a Christian, the Lord gave you power and authority over the enemy. The Lord did not give the enemy power and authority over you. And you are not the enemy's punching bag. He doesn't get to manipulate you. He doesn't get to make you sick. He doesn't get to make you feel however he wants to feel. The Lord gave you power and authority, so you take it back. We do not have to be swayed by people's opinions about us, how people feel about us, earthly circumstances that are always changing. We get to choose what we think about. We get to choose how we feel. We get to choose what we do and the choices that we make. And it's my encouragement to you, and just like my advice to you, from me to you, always choose to think higher. And if you're feeling shaken, if you're feeling afraid, if something negative kind of comes up within you and you don't like it, and you're like, oh, that's not good, instead of pointing a finger, pointing at the person who's gossiping about you, pointing at the enemy who's obviously just trying to attack you because that's just what he does, look within you and say, why did that shake me? What's going on? You know, I think about the apostles in Scripture. I think about Jesus, how even when Jesus wanted the cup to pass from him, and he prayed and he asked the Father, please, Lord, if there's any way that this can pass from me, please let it pass from me. And he was sweating blood from stress. He chose to trust the Father, and he obeyed the Father unto death. He had a God perspective. His mind was set on the Father, far above everything that was happening to him, far above the nails that were going in his hands, far above all of his friends betraying him at his most vulnerable moments. The apostles who were persecuted died as martyrs, praying for forgiveness for their persecutors. Their minds were set far above the swords that were cutting off their heads, far above the stones that were pelting their skin. and bruising their organs, far above seeing their friends burnt on stakes. Their minds were set far above. And to think now, the underground church in Iran, I think of the women who are being persecuted for their faith in Jesus, who are being molested and are living underground because they know at any time that they're caught, they could die. Their perspective is honor. Their perspective is the Lord gets to choose when I live and when I die. Their perspective is it's an honor to die for Christ. That's a God perspective. But to be honest, in America, we don't face the same persecution at all. The persecution that we face is verbal. It's, not fun, and it still hurts, and it's emotional pain, but it's nothing compared to that. And I think step one for us is to become emotionally dependent upon Jesus, fully trusting Jesus, becoming steadfast in our faith to where earthly circumstances and other people just not liking us very much doesn't bother us. Choosing to forgive, choosing to love Jesus, choosing to trust, choosing to not complain, choosing to take steps toward healing, moving on, and loving one another well, and letting our God perspective, being focused on Jesus, shape us into being more like Him, loving Him more, loving ourselves, and loving other people. So that's my advice from me to you. The next time you feel shaken, the next time something comes up within you, instead of pointing the finger, just internally look and pray and ask why.